What's up, investors? It's the Russian dude. The idea that a new Trump administration will somehow magically stop the war in Ukraine in Russia's favor has recently gained a big popularity among certain segments of the Russian population. Such people always kind of believed that if Trump wins, he will be able to push Zelensky towards negotiations. And when he actually won the elections and got sworn into the office, this idea became some sort of a fact for them. It is no longer about if it happens, it is when it happens. All of that was obviously thanks to the Russian propaganda. At first glance it looks like nothing more than a daring fantasy. But the larger problem is that this wishful thinking has pushed people to act in very risky ways. Some of them, lured by the promise of quick money, are voluntarily rushing to enlistment offices, assuming they will never actually face the horrors of the front lines. They pin their hopes on a sudden peace deal that will supposedly render their military contracts obsolete, while still getting their hands on huge, multi-million ruble sign-up bonuses. And yet, the reality tells a much grimmer story. The war is not ending. The government keeps expanding its recruitment drives, and many are learning the hard way that dreams of an early exit can quickly turn into a nightmare. Such wishful thinking, in fact, gave birth to a so-called grim paradox, when the more people expect the war to end soon, actually prolongs the conflict in return. It starts with a collective gut feeling that a second Trump's presidency means a diplomatic breakthrough is on the way. People who believe in this idea do not usually question themselves whether there's any clear evidences to back it up. Just like with any other propaganda, basically. The technique here is the same. Keep repeating the same narrative, let people dream of a new reality where peace is achieved and the war is over, and then keep repeating even more that all of this is coming soon. It is in human nature to always have hopes, dreams and faith, and that's precisely what the propaganda exploits. People just think something big will happen, a near miraculous shift that saves them from risking their lives on the Ukrainian battleground. And that's precisely why they started lining up outside draft offices, hoping to get the last opportunity of their lifetimes of making big money quick, just by leaving a signature. The hope is that while the whole paperwork will be processed, by the time they finish the medical examinations, buy all the necessary equipment, arrive at training camp, finish basic military education, and in the worst case scenario maybe be actually sent to the front lines, well, by the time this whole process finishes, and that will take at least a couple of months, the war will be already over. Or at least there will be some sort of a ceasefire that will prevent them from risking their lives, but still pocketing that nice chunk of money. This conflict is about to end. If anything, the fighting has only intensified, as artillery, drone strikes and sabotage missions are ramping up in scale. Strikes into Russian territory once made front-page news, and now they are so frequent that major outlets barely mention anything about an oil depot blowing up in a massive fireball. It's a business as usual, just the consequences of war, so deal with it, people. And guess what? Amid this relentless violence, the Russian government still continues to push for fresh manpower. Regional authorities have their backs against the wall, scrambling to meet new quotas that come from the very top. These quotas are increasing, not shrinking. That alone should make it evident that the Kremlin is planning for a long and grueling campaign. The official decree on mobilization remains in effect, and there is no discussion on the horizon about cancelling it. People who sign military contracts might be stuck in them indefinitely, because even though the fighting might be over, for as long as the decree on mobilization is not cancelled, or for as long as the special military operation is not declared to be over, these people might still be sent to Ukraine for so-called peacekeeping missions, Russian style. So whether you're fighting or in a training camp, your personal fate and life now belongs to the Ministry of Defense of Russia, for as long as they seem fit. If anyone nurses illusions about a quick payday followed by an easy discharge, well, unfortunately they are in for a huge eye-opener. Olga Romanova, a well-known Russian prisoners' rights advocate, recently revealed that convicts are allegedly being turned away at the medical evaluation stage. The reason is not that surprising, to be honest. There is such a big new wave of volunteers arriving at draft offices that they can afford to be picky now. It was in the past when a Russian side tried to enlist anyone they could for as long as person had both legs, arms and eyes. But now, it seems like it is different. No one wants so-called damaged goods anymore, when there are plenty of presumably healthier, more presentable recruits to sign up. There is no need for even prisoners, which is always a huge debate topic for the Russian society. Because on one hand, how can you release a murderer and give them a gun in the war zone, expecting he will behave well and listen to the commands? While on the other hand, if it is not the prisoners who will be sitting in trenches, then who else? Then of course it will be the fathers, the sons and the brothers of regular people. That is the dilemma. Well, apparently not anymore. And the reason why there are so many new willing Russians to enlist is what we discussed in the previous chapter. Leave your signature, collect 4 million rubles and hope there won't be any fighting involved. But it is very dangerous mindset. One that turns the draft office into a twisted kind of lottery booth. People step up and say, I will take those millions of rubles, thank you very much. And once the war ends, I will be long gone. Thank you for making me rich quick. Except there is no guarantee of this war ending soon, and the recruiters themselves certainly are not handing out disclaimers. Sure, they might paint a rosy picture in advertisements or keep quiet about the horrifying fates that descended upon previous records, but in the end, the only certainty is that signing a contract means you have essentially sold your future to the Russian government. To Putin, let's be honest. You're gambling with your life on an idea that the war will stop before your training finishes, and if you are wrong, there is no way back. No simple way to walk away. These contracts are non-expiring and auto-renewing. The only way home from Ukrainian trenches is if Putin issues an end of war order, which he does not look like wants to do anytime soon. With each passing day, the battlefield grows more volatile. Both sides are stepping up attacks in waves that dwarf the early stages of the conflict. Just because not too many people talk about the war, or because the territorial changes are barely seen on the map, does not mean that the war intensity has faded away completely. All of this suggests that neither party is close to calling it quits. Zelensky is still yet to fulfill his promise of liberating unlawfully occupied territories. Putin can neither present a total liberation of Donbas region and the exile of Nazistic drug lords from the Ukrainian leadership. While politicians in Moscow, Kiev or Washington might hint at negotiations, nothing concrete has emerged, at least just yet. Just because Donald Trump took office does not mean he has had a heart-to-heart with Vladimir Putin about brokering peace. In fact, there is no formal evidence that such talks are even scheduled, let alone guaranteed to succeed. We only hear vague promises and declarations, and it's up to each one of us to believe them or not. Some people entertain the hope that those things are happening. The others will not accept anything coming from the mouth of Trump as a truth, while the rest prefer to wait and consider the possibility that some of these promises might come true. Anyone who enlists under the assumption that they will never face combat is setting themselves for a very big disappointment, let me tell you that. Russia's legislative framework gives the government a lot of room to maneuver when it comes to keeping soldiers on contract. If they need you on the front lines, you will go, no matter what kind of illusions you started out with. This unsettling truth mirrors an earlier pattern. When mobilization began, many recruits and their families assumed the war would not last longer than a year. Now, those same families are staging small protests, feeling betrayed by a government that never actually promised to bring them home at any specific time. Which is true. If you look back at any of Putin's previous addresses to the nation, not a single mention of the timeline was ever made. It was all just for the sake of victory. A victory. Whenever it happens. The government barely needs even to lie. People, unfortunately, trick themselves into hearing what they want to hear, and the consequences could not be more severe. One of them is the grim paradox of free money. Here is the truly unexpected twist. The more people sign these contracts, believing the war is about to end, the more manpower the Kremlin accumulates, which in return leads to boosting Kremlin's ability to keep fighting. This bizarre paradox strengthens the war effort instead of cutting it short. If draft offices are swarmed by volunteers, there is no pressing incentive for Putin to scale back. Far from being under pressure, he sees a surplus of recruits waiting in line for a paycheck. Whether they are motivated by desperation, being naive, or followed a misguided gut instinct that Trump is going to fix everything, their willingness to enlist prolongs, in reality, the conflict. The feeling of war's near end causes more people to join the army, which then only extends the invasion until this cycle breaks. So it is the responsibility of Russian families to talk about this paradox with their men, who are willing to enlist. But the problem is, Russia is a massive country with almost 145 million people living in it. So it will definitely take some time until people finally realize that following through on your hopes of wars ending is actually very counterproductive. This unnecessary prolongation spells disaster for those who sign up, expecting to sit on a base camp, enjoy free meals, and collect some easy money. Once inside the system, they have no say about where they are deployed or how soon. Soldiers do not get to wave a contract in front of an officer and say, "Thank you for the cash, now send me home, I'm ready." Contracts in this war have become almost unbreachable. If you bet on the Kremlin letting you go without a fight, you are wagering your life against a machine that has zero interest in your personal well-being. Those illusions can cost you everything. What is needed in reality is for families of Russia to sit down and talk. Digest all the information, try to see where this war is heading, and remember all the broken promises of the regime in the past. People need to start talking to each other and believing in themselves, not unconditionally agreeing with everything that propaganda tells them from the TV screens. By sowing the seeds of doubt and dissent in their minds and minds of their friends and relatives, by taking their problems to the streets and uniting themselves in opposition groups, this is how the people of Russia can break free from this never-ending cycle of lies, deceit, hatred, and bloodlust. It is all in the hands of the Russian people, and we, the citizens of the world, can never abandon them in such dark times. Well, there you have it, guys. If you enjoyed today's episode, please subscribe to my channel for more videos like this. If you wish to support my work, there are links down below, for example my Patreon, where I upload these episodes in early access, and then there is also an extra chapter of ridiculous Russian propaganda, like good old times. Thanks so much for watching, see you tomorrow.
We won't succumb to their tricks, the facade they try to sell. Their twisted words and feeble claims are resolve they cannot quell. We see through their lies, their feeble attempts to sway. We do not believe